Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Summer. I am doing another haircut tutorial today. I've had so many comments on different videos asking, is this cut good for fine hair? How do you do this on fine hair? Can you show us how to cut fine hair? So that is what I'm doing today. I have my mannequin here that I have tried to texturize out her sides to thin them out so that way it's a little bit more realistic to how often clients' hair lines up in salon with those finer haircuts. So I'm gonna show you guys today how I go about layering my finer hair clients. One side of the head, I'm gonna show you the proper way to do it or how I do it in salon. And the other side, I'm gonna show you what happens when you overcut fine hair. So that way we can avoid those simple mistakes and always give great cuts to our clients. So let's get started. Okay, so we're just gonna jump right into sectioning. I'm not cutting the perimeter. We're solely going to be focusing on the layers because that's what's most important. So to do my sectioning, I just like to separate the back from the front. To make note, this tutorial is for thin hair, not exclusively fine hair. The two sort of coincide with each other, but I will be stressing what result happens when you overlayer thin hair and how to avoid that. Okay, so when I am cutting layers in the back on a client with thinner, finer hair, I do my layers just like I do my long layers in my long layer tutorial. Usually what I find with thinner hair, it's not so much the case in the back as much as it is on the side. So I just do the same layers that I do, like I said, with the long layer. So I'm gonna come in. I like to rotate my comb so I'm getting the fine teeth to really pull nice tension there. And we're gonna go straight up, let all that fall, and just point cut this angle. And then come up again and cut. So you're not trying to create a ton of layers. Most people with thinner hair, you're not gonna be able to do as many short layers just because they don't have quite that bulk and thickness or weight as somebody with like medium thickness or super thick hair. So we're just gonna pull with that tension, the fine tooth, come up, let that hair fall out. I see my guide here, and I'm gonna cut. Up. Now as you round to the sides, I feel like less hair comes, or less hair to cut, I guess. Come up, let it fall, and you've got this little bit here to cut. And then we're gonna come back to the center, taking our next section. Remember to let that hair fall, cut. Gonna kind of go through and kind of cross check, making sure everything blends. So sometimes I'll come down and switch my angle instead of going all the way up with it. I'll just lightly come out and angle it up and just lightly get that in between here. The point of a long layer is you're trying to create some shape without removing too much length and weight. Most clients who like long layers, they just want to see slight movement, not a ton. You're trying to keep the weight at the base. All right, so now that we've done the bulk of the back, we're gonna come across just on this very top layer. You can use your clips or your comb And you're just gonna come straight up. Flip that comb to get some nice even tension. And then we're just gonna cut across this top here to even it out. I just like to kind of lightly point cut. And then let that fall. Okay, so now we're gonna move into the sides. This is really, the sides are the main point that you wanna focus on with your fine, thin-haired client, and this is gonna be the bulk of the video. So I'm gonna spray down a little bit better here. It's kind of a little too dry. So how I create my layers in the beginning of the sides, I do it in a similar way. I just come across at the ear, and instead of being even here with this, like in the same direction, pulling out and up, I'm gonna pull everything back towards me. So where you're standing behind the client, so we're gonna go back and up, and you're just really skimming this last little piece up here. You're not trying to cut into all of this hair here. You're literally just trying to coat the very, very top layer. So we're gonna take our next section. You don't wanna pull out, you wanna pull back towards you. So back and up, and just hit that little bit that's out. All along the face, bring it all the way back, twisting, and cut. And then we're gonna repeat the same on the other side. Okay, taking our first section of the sides, pulling it completely back towards you. We're gonna twist our hands and cut. Back and up with a little twist and cut. Okay, so now that I have created the layers, again, this is just a simple, long layered cut. There's not a ton to it. I'm gonna go ahead and get her dry, and then I'm gonna show you guys how you can create a little bit shorter of a layer on thinner hair. And on the other side, I'm gonna show you what happens if you do too much and how you can get holes in the hairline where the client's gonna lose that weight and bulk that they have, where their hair is gonna look even thinner, and how you can avoid doing that. So I'm gonna get her dry here really quick, and then we'll get started on her sides. Okay, so now we have her dried and styled. So now the fun part begins. So this is what the hair looks like on the one side, and it's pretty much even on the other side with very little layering. Right now, her shortest layer is just barely coming down. It almost is one length. There's very little movement to it, but you can see kind of the weight here in the hair. It's not a ton, but it's enough that it doesn't look super, super thin. I wanna show you when you come in and take out this top layer, essentially, you can see how much more spacey that starts to get. And then if you take a little bit more, you really see how much thinner and finer that is through the ends. So what happens is when you have a client with thin hair, especially in the front of their face, it's usually like everything from the ear forward is where it gets really thinned out. What happens is when you come and you take a layer, like you were a standard short layer, so I'm gonna base this off of like my shorter layer tutorial that I have. When you come in and take your piece, like you're gonna do your layer, you come in and that bottom falls out ever so slightly. If I cut all this, it's not gonna fall fully to cover where this is a lot thinner. So we're gonna pretend that we're just doing a nice short layered haircut so you guys can see what happens. So I've let that little bottom fall out. I see my guide here and I would cut. And then I'd come up. So we've come in, we've let this bottom fall, we've started cutting our guide. And then we're gonna come up. And then I usually twist my hands for that shorter layer.
And we're gonna come back down. We're just gonna keep going. I'm letting that bottom fall out, cutting, coming up, starting to twist my hands. Okay, so we've cut kind of our bulk of layers here, and then usually what I like to do with the shorter layer, I come up and I really will deep point cut into that top to add that texture, to really soften it. Okay, so now that I have cut my shorter layers, how I would for somebody with like thicker, coarse hair, I wanna show you guys now what it looks like here on this side. Okay, so hopefully this is translating well on the camera. You can see now her shortest piece is up in here, where we have lost a little bit of that thickness and bulk. The ends here are very sparse and see-through to some level. And then her framing around the face, this is what happens like with my own hair. I have extensions in now, but I have a hole right in here that I recently accidentally cut my layer and created my hole. I can't personally do face framing because of, I just don't have the thickness here. So on somebody that doesn't, let's say, have the weight underneath here, it is harder to do face framing because you're losing it throughout here. Now, somebody with really thick hair, they probably like their hair cut into, but if you've got a client with thin, fine hair and they're just like, my hair is so lifeless, sometimes cutting layers isn't always gonna help that because you're gonna be taking out the weight and thickness that they might feel through their ends if you layer it too much. So I'm gonna blend this in a little bit better to how you would if they were a client in salon. So now some clients might still like the layered look on their thinner hair, but I just feel like you start losing that weight and it just becomes a little too thin feeling for them. Where on the other side, so as you can see on this side here, we haven't added in all those layers. So it has a lot more thickness to the ends compared to the other side. And then straight on, you really see she's, I mean, I know we have a kind of a face frame here going, but this is a little bit thinner and just less weight where she's got a little bit more bulk going through here. So if you have a client though that does have thin hair and they wanna see some layers, what I like to do is I'll still do my long hair layers of pulling it back and up, but after it's dry, I'll then go in and create some shorter pieces that also allow you to keep a little bit of the weight at the bottom. Okay, so what I will do for my clients that wanna see a little bit more movement, and this is how I actually get my own haircut with the girl that cuts my hair, is we come in with it dry. Where's her ear? So I'm gonna pull everything all the way up. So all of that hair is gonna fall out to keep that perimeter and base nice and thick as possible as it can. And then I'm gonna come up and then twist my hands. Again, letting all of that hair fall out, combing it down. So what I'm gonna do now that all this hair has fallen out, the shortest piece that's at the tip of my fingers, I'm gonna come in and angle in and cut at an angle meeting to basically where my knuckles are, up to where the shortest tip is here. And then I just like to point cut, so I'm just gonna come in and point cut all of that. And then we're gonna let that hair fall. So we've got our nice piece here that's a little shorter, but you've kept a lot of that weight down here, so you get a nice thicker look. And then to make that meet, if you wanna cross check, you'll just come, bring it up, and then maybe slightly cut these hairs. But you're not trying to do as a severe layer in here because you're trying to keep that weight that most clients with thinner hair, they wanna see. Everybody always is like, I wish I had thicker hair. I know I do. I just put extensions in because of that. So I'm gonna do the same thing. We're gonna come all the way up and then twist those fingers. Seeing your shortest piece in here. Comb out that hair, making sure it's falling so you're keeping your weight. And then we're just gonna point cut down. And then you can come out and twist just ever so slightly, nicking those little corners. So it creates just a little bit more layering. So it's not quite as short as like your standard short layered, but you could still come in and angle it a little bit more if you wanted to. Or just even doing like some deep point cutting helps kind of cut into it so you get more movement without that commitment of a layer. And then, like I said, with the face, I don't like doing a ton of face framing. That's just my personal preference. Especially because, like I said, a lot of times people right in their receded areas don't have as much weight. So if you go in and do a face framing, you're usually, if that's the case, like on myself, if I do a heavy face framing, I don't have any hair underneath. So that's how I get a hole like I have before I put my extensions in. But if your client was wanting a little bit of face framing, what I'll do typically is I'll just come in and take like their very, very front piece, and I'll just lightly sliver down on the outside, nothing crazy, but just very, very little to break it up. And again, if they stress that they really wanna see more of a face framing, you can do more. That's just personally what I like to do with it. Okay, so now that we have cut both sides, to show you another comparison, I'm gonna put my hand here under the mannequin so you can really see how much more thinner this looks. My hand's easily visible. You don't have that weight at the bottom. You do have a little bit more movement, but if you have a client with already very thin hair, they're not gonna wanna most likely lose that weight that they have at the bottom. So this is what it would look like. You might even get more holes with a real client, just because the mannequin hair, I can only do so much to thin it out. And then the face framing is all personal preference. Like I said, I like to keep it longer, but if a client wants it, you can certainly do that. Just be aware of any possible thinness that they might have in their receded areas, like I've expressed about my own hair. And then once again, on the other side, with the layers a little bit more modified, you definitely keep much more thickness here throughout the ends. My hand is still visible, but not quite as much. You might not have quite as much movement, but you do have some shorter pieces here that they can play around with for if they're wanting to curl their hair or have a little bit of body and texture. So hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit more with how you can create your layers with your thinner clients or clients with baby fine hair. Like I said, it's all personal preference with clients. So if somebody does want to see that face framing, do it, just make note. And then really make sure when you're adding in those layers and wanting to keep the weight at the bottom, really twist your hand up so you're only cutting very little into the top and you're not compromising those ends. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a comment below if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week.